Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I'm going to tell you about the best comedies you can currently watch on Netflix. So this is going to be a list of 10 comedy movies, and whereas I would normally rank them, because comedy is so subjective, I'm just going to list them in somewhat of a random order. Also, these are not necessarily the 10 best. Some of them are obvious picks. There's some great movies currently on the platform. These are 10 that a lot of you may not have seen. I did it in such a way that hopefully everyone watching at least gets a couple of new recommendations out of this list. So, starting off at number 10 with Swiss Army Man. This is a fairly difficult movie to recommend. However, I do know a significant portion of my audience does love this movie, and it is very funny. It's also this oddly heartwarming indie flick, but Paul Dano plays a castaway. He's trapped on an island and discovers a corpse played by Daniel Radcliffe, aka Harry Potter, and it just gets actually way weirder from there. He essentially befriends this corpse and uses it to survive in a variety of ways. A lot of them fairly fanciful, so there's really crazy visuals. There's also an audio component to this movie, and I'm just glad smell-o-vision isn't a thing. This movie's fairly gross, it's fairly crude, but again, oddly heartwarming. If you like odd, weird indie movies, this one is going to be right up your alley. There's a good chance you've seen it if that's you, but if you somehow have missed it, this is going to be one of the best picks off of this list. If that's not you, tread lightly with Swiss Army Man.
I don't think I've ever been this excited. You're excited? Feel these nipples.
A really great, just silly comedy is Baseketball. This is actually created by the same guys that created South Park. So fans of South Park know this movie, probably love this movie. Very similar humor. It's about a couple of guys that create a new game that takes a country by storm, and it's a mix of basketball and baseball. It's sort of the type of game that kids make up in their driveway, and it just takes off and it becomes this like major league sport. So it's a funny concept, but then all the little jokes in it are funny. Now obviously, as the creators of South Park, it's loaded with crude humor, but with movies like this, for me, some of the best laughs are the non-crude one. And I'm not offended by crude humor. I just find the ones that don't need to be crude to be funny are more clever, and I then appreciate them even more. But if you love movies like Super Troopers, things like that, and you haven't seen Baseketball, this is going to be one of the best picks off of the list for you. Now, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is an odd one. I saw this one when I was in high school and did not find it funny at all, and that is because most of the jokes are inside jokes, and I did not have enough movie knowledge at the time to appreciate all of the jokes in this one. So this is the one for movie buffs, and not just movie buffs. You also need to know Kevin Smith's movies. So obviously, if you are a fan of Kevin Smith, you've probably seen this one. However, if you've seen movies like Clerks and you kind of liked him and you never really watched all of Kevin Smith's movies, this is a great one. It references his other work. It references movies like Good Will Hunting and The Empire Strikes Back, and it all works together really well. But without those other references, a lot of the humor in this one it doesn't go over your head. It just doesn't go anywhere. So avoid this one if that is not you. But if you consider yourself a movie buff and you like sort of inside jokes, Jay and Silent Bob is a treasure trove. Let's go with trove. Treasure trove of inside jokes. One that you can enjoy with the kids that I could watch this one by myself and laughed, every minute, is Captain Underpants. Now, not only is this one about a guy who fights crime in his underpants, it's about two boys and the friendship between two, I guess 10-year-old boys that really like to cut up, and it's got a really great sense of humor. Kevin Hart voices one of the boys. As soon as the whatever production company logo comes up, the two boys are kind of singing it and giggling to each other, and that just goes throughout. It's got this really just fun vibe that I really enjoyed. Like as an adult, it had a very nostalgic thing for me, even though these books came out like when I was in college and I don't really know anything about them. I had a blast watching this one with my son. I could have seen myself watching this one at like age 25 and just dying all the way through it without watching it with a kid. So I think it's a good recommendation if that sounds like you at all.
You don't put a cap in their house.
Ow! Oh, that burns!
Oh my gosh, David, let me see.
Oh, God!
I think that bullet just went straight between your cheeks.
Yeah, it feels like it just grazed my biscuits right there betwixt them.
For another really silly comedy, Masterminds is directed by the same guy that did Napoleon Dynamite. Now, after Napoleon Dynamite, he did Nacho Libre, which I liked enough, and then he did some really, what I consider to be horrific movies. They just could not, they didn't make sense, they were just weird, they were too weird. And this is the first one that he's hit on now. This one is weird. It's got really, really weird characters. Zach Galifianakis, Jason Sudeikis. What's her fucking name? Why can I never remember her fucking name? Kristen Wiig. I didn't even have to look it up. Just so you know, I didn't even get anywhere. It popped into my head before I... Anyway, Kristen Wiig, Owen Wilson. Just a good cast doing really weird shenanigans, really odd stuff. But to me, this one still works. You can get into this one and have a good time. It's about a heist gone wrong, and Jason Sudeikis plays this weird hitman, and there's this love triangle thing, and a lot of weird stuff going on, but it's just fun, funny shenanigans, and it worked for me. It's a little bit too weird to be, like, endearing and to become like a classic, but if you haven't seen it and you just weren't interested in it, this one is way better than I had anticipated it to be. If you like this type of content, definitely click that subscribe button and be sure to click the little bell icon so you get notified when I put out new videos just like this one.
Oh, time out, I got some in my eye.
Now, another one that's really silly, but that you could watch as a family because it is rated PG, is The Man Who Knew Too Little with Bill Murray. This is a really funny sort of reluctant spy comedy. And to me, even though a lot of PG rated comedies just feel kind of like dumbed down, they're neutered for a general audience, this one is not really like that. It just happens to not have any of the crude humor in it. Because it's Bill Murray, it works way better than it would have with anybody else. And it's one of the few Bill Murray movies, like with him as the star, that you could watch with kids. And for that, it gets some bonus points on this list as well, because it's not very often that I get to give you a strong recommendation for something you can watch with the whole family, if you watch this show regularly.
Sucker. You foolish sucker.
Bit of what? Hello?
Hello, is Eric there, please?
For something completely different, Eagle vs. Shark is going to... So this is a New Zealand comedy. If you've ever seen a New Zealand movie, like What We Do in the Shadows, and you like that brand of humor, you're going to like this one. This one's a little more indie. It doesn't have a laugh a minute like What We Do in the Shadows, but it stars Jermaine Clement, who is half of the Flight of the Conchords. If you were a fan of that show on HBO during its limited run, this movie is that same brand of humor. It's about a guy that falls for a girl, feels he needs to prove himself, and he plays really kind of a terrible person, like an asshole that really needs to figure himself out, but it makes for some really funny sequences, and I had a blast watching this one. There is cringe, heavy cringe in this one, but if you like cringe comedy, like Flight of the Conchords, this one's going to be the best one off of this list for you.
Robbers, Tom? Think of it like this. Robin Hood and his merry men. Robbing from the rich, giving to the poor, keeping some money, keeping the money.
Another good little indie that I actually got to watch at a film festival is Band of Robbers. Now, this is actually a modern-day telling, not of Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn, but it's sort of like an adaptation of the characters. It's not a retelling, but the characters are inspired by it. So it's got this kind of otherworldly kind of vibe. Hannibal Buress, who I find really funny, plays a major character, and it's just got this quirky, fun vibe. This one's rated PG-13, so it is not for kids, yet you could watch this one with teenagers comfortably, and they'll enjoy it, and I enjoyed it as well.
I might be able to catch it in his colon.
I'll get the lubricant.
There's no time for lubricant.
There's always time for lubricant!
Evolution is a sci-fi comedy directed by Ivan Reitman, who's most famous for Ghostbusters. So this was a huge deal when this came out. This was a big return for him, and it was David Duchovny's first big role after starring in the X-Files for so long. So there was a lot going into this one, and it just didn't quite deliver in terms of the box office. Like, people went to go see it, but it hasn't really stood the test of time either. It is good, though. A meteor crashes and brings life to Earth, life that evolves very, very rapidly. So in a very short window of time, you get all of these crazy monsters that develop, and it's a really great monster sci-fi movie that is somewhat family-friendly. Because it's PG-13, there is some crude humor, some really funny crude humor, but not for little kids, yet not just crazy and over the top either. It's fairly accessible.
You're about the worst tourist in the whole world. If I'd grown up on a farm and was retarded, Bruges might impress me, but I didn't, so it doesn't.
But my number one pick out of all the ones I mentioned is In Bruges. Now, I do need to prepare you for this one because this is a dark, dark comedy. This one is not for everybody. A lot of you are not going to find this movie funny at all. There are jokes about suicide. Yeah, this one's intense. So it's actually done by the same writer-director as 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. If you liked that one, I find this to be his best film. And I like all of his movies, including 7 Psychopaths. But this one is the best. It might not even be my favorite, but it's the best because it's the tightest. It's the best story, and it works together really well. And it's just ultimately the best film I think that he's produced. It's one of Colin Farrell's absolute best performances. Really, really great stuff from him. And he's really come into his own as of late. Like, he's in the prime of his career now, in my opinion. But this is the peak of his performance. Really great performances all around. But if you like dark comedy, I have not really mentioned a dark one on here, with the exception of, like, Swiss Army Man is close. This one is grimmer than grim, yet I find it really funny and just kind of charming in its own weird way. If you like this one, let me know in the comments below, or let me know which one of these is your favorite or which ones you will be watching. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so a number of ways, like becoming a Patreon supporter like one of these fine people, or checking out the podcast. That's right, there is a Flick Connection podcast everywhere podcasts are found, including its very own YouTube channel. There is a link to that channel in the description below. Go over there, subscribe. It's a great way to get tons more movie recommendations. You don't have to listen to the entire podcast. I also upload clips, movie reviews that are just uncut, so you'll get a lot more recommendations if you also subscribe and click the bell over there. But that's it for this video. You can also let me know what are some topics you'd like me to cover in upcoming videos if you happen to still be watching this one.